Hello and welcome to another edition of As the Blade Turns. My name is Dave Leese. On yesterday's video, I discussed the appeals filed by the World Anti-Doping Agency and the International Skating Union to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in the doping case of Kamila Valieva. With that case and the potential status of Russian figure skaters remaining undecided, I thought it was time to turn the spotlight on the ISU and discuss their leadership and credibility in this situation and many other situations from the recent past. The International Skating Union, though the creator of numerous arbitrary rules about levels and points, or bean counting, if you talk to Dick Button or Frank Carroll, is rather weak when it comes to enforcing the bigger rules of its own about safe sport and fair play. In yesterday's video, I discussed how the ISU never investigated Russia's role in the 2002 pear scandal, which was a purported quid pro quo between Russia and France. The Russians were also not sanctioned for their role in the block judging scandal in the ice dance event at the 1998 Olympics. Sviatoslav Babenko, a Russian judge, has been sanctioned twice. Once for signaling his preferred order of a finish to another judge by tapping with his feet. The other time for talking to another judge in Russian. If you watch the video of Dick Button's rant at the 2003 World Skating Federation press conference, he referred to Babenko and the other judge as those tap dancing judges. Babenko and Koryatek returned to judging after both incidents. Back in 1999, Babenko was accused of exchanging information with the Ukrainian judge Alfred Koryatek during the World Figure Skating Championships in Helsinki. A Canadian television crew caught Babenko on video tapping out his preferred order of the finish to the Ukrainian judge during the pairs final. Wouldn't you know, the two judges had virtually identical scores. Babenko received a 3-year ban, yet it was later reduced to 18 months when no one was watching. In 2016, Babenko was judging at an international competition in Slovakia. Heading into the free skate, British pair champion Christopher Boyaji and Zoe Jones were in 4th place and hoped to earn a medal. While they were skating, Babenko and another judge began talking quite loudly in Russian, according to an ISU disciplinary report. Their voices were so loud that 4 other judges looked in that direction, nearly in unison. All this took place while Jones and Boyaji were skating. Well, even though Babenko was sanctioned for this incident and the other previous incident in 1999, the Russian Federation felt that Babenko was a good judge and put him in the pool to judge at the 2018 Olympic Games. And wouldn't you know, because he wasn't sanctioned, the ISU approved it. You see, in the world of international figure skating, no judge has ever received a lifetime ban for breaking the rules. Now, the 2014 Olympic Games have long been mired in controversy, from the drug cocktails Russian athletes were receiving to the urine swapping of the RUSADA through mouse holes, which somehow only resulted in the Russian Federation from losing their flag and being known as the Olympic athletes from Russia at the 2018 Olympics and the Russian Olympic Committee in 2022. But, you see, the winner of the women's figure skating event, Adelina Sotnikova, was photographed hugging caller Alla Shahovtsova, the wife of Valentin Pasayev, head of the Russian Figure Skating Federation. Alla, a longtime powerful judge and member of the ISU Technical Committee for Ice Dance for many years, was also the judge involved in the block judging controversy from 1998. A quick Google search will tell you just how many figure skaters and fans continue to debate the results of the women's event from Sochi. Well, wouldn't you know that a bottle of Sotnikova's urine from Sochi had a single scratch on the inside, a long horizontal mark on the inside of the lid. While it wasn't absolute proof that the bottle was tampered with after it was sealed, it was indeed a mark. Now, other samples had multiple marks on the inside of the bottle, but this also bottle was far from kosher. Note that the ISU did not push for Sotnikova to lose her gold medal or for a further investigation to take place. 2 years later, Yekaterina Bobrova tested positive for meldonium at the 2016 European Championships. Though she was barred from competing at 2016 Worlds, her suspension was eventually shortened, and she was allowed to return to international competition the next season. The ISU responded to judging scandals by changing its judging system instead of cracking down on the judges themselves. They created a judging system so difficult to comprehend that the sport lost both credibility and viewership, but at least it was harder for the press to critique the scores. The ISU even made the judges anonymous for as long as they could get away with. Now, for years, the highest-ranking figure skating official in the ISU was Russian, vice president of the ISU, Alexander Trusova, a mathematician who was involved in pushing changes to the scale of values that always seemed to manage to favor the Russian figure skaters. Megan Duhamel is quick to point out how the side-by-side Lutz she performed was devalued, yet the value of the toe loop and Saukow somehow remained the same. It just so happened that this cut into the advantage she had over her competitors, many of her top competitors being Russian. Eventually, the throw quad and quad twist were also devalued at a time when the Russian pairs were unable to master these elements. If you're a member of Twitter, you'll remember Chris Knierim tweeting about how it just didn't make sense to train the quad twist because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Today, Russian coaches push for these elements to increase in value now that the country has enough pairs with room to spare a few. The initial excuse was that the elements were too dangerous, even as the same country pushed its prepubescent teenage girls to master multiple quadruple jumps. It is telling that the ISU did not push to the Court of Arbitration for Sport for Valieva to be banned outright or for a certain period of time. If you watch the ISU Congress in June, the ISU's lawyers deliberately cautioned their congressmen not to vote in favor of banning the Russian and Belarusian federations. They said it was in order to avoid a lawsuit. You see, at Congress, the ISU also put in place their own remedy to the situation in Beijing, which was to push for the age limit to be raised in the women's event. You have to wonder, is this also another cosmetic solution made to look like they're cracking down to remedy the situation in Beijing? It is purportedly to prevent abuse in the sport. The ISU, in its appeal to the CAS, has said that all athletes need to be protected from doping. That's interesting, as the medical care of Kamila Valieva, Anna Sherbakova, and Alexandra Trusova, as well as the other Russian figure skaters that were members of the Russian figure skating Olympic team, were all supervised by Dr. Philip Shvetsky. And though Valieva is the only athlete who has a positive test for a banned substance, and those in the sport point to her entourage as being responsible for the positive test, there has never been a discussion by WADA or the ISU into digging into old samples of other Russian figure skaters from other competitions. It was indeed known at the Olympics that skater Anna Sherbakova was only eating powdered food, which she herself posted on Instagram. Again, a suspicious and potentially dangerous practice. The appeals of WADA and the ISU to CAS did not mention investigating Valieva's entourage, neither her coach Eteri Tutberidze or her doctor, Dr. Philip Shvetsky. Now, RUSADA has kept their investigation confidential because they say that they have to protect the confidentiality of a young girl. But that so-called confidentiality just happens to shield whether any investigation into Tutberidze or Shvetsky have taken place. Both Tutberidze and Shvetsky continue to appear at Russian figure skating competitions. While fans will inevitably comment on this video that Tutberidze and Shvetsky should be banned from the sport, one has to question how that would actually be feasible. While they could be barred from attending competitions, it would be up to the Russian Federation to police whether or not she would be allowed to coach at home in Hrustalny. And even if the ISU attempted to ban tutberidze from coaching domestically in Russia, it would be up to the Russians to police whether or not she was able to work in an ice rink. And can a federation who has swapped urine samples through mouse holes, manipulated scores, and given trimetazidine to a teenager really be trusted to be honorable or effective at watchdogging? And really, would the ISU have the bones to uphold their own suspension? But if you've watched the recent documentary about Harley and Katya, the closing graphics about the suicide documentary discussed how the ISU raised the age limit for skaters. Now, one has to wonder, are they merely encouraging skaters to starve themselves for even longer? Frank Carroll infamously referred to the Russian figure skaters as cadavers at the 2022 Olympic Games. Sherbakova has given interviews about just how intensely she monitored her caloric intake during the Olympic season in a manner that was dangerous, to say the least. And while many will point to gymnastics for rampant cases of age falsification, it is important to remember that figure skating has had many cases of age falsification of its own. And wouldn't you know that the ISU has also overlooked them? Are they setting themselves up for more cases of age falsification in the future? Now, one former skater that I talked to, who's also involved in the business end of figure skating, pointed to Russian and Chinese skaters who have routinely had their ages falsified by their federations over the years. The interesting thing is that these federations care so much about winning that they aren't just faking ages for the athletes to be eligible to compete at the Worlds or the Olympics. No. In many cases, pair and dance teams have their ages falsified in order for both partners in a team to remain eligible to compete at Junior Worlds. These federations care so much about winning that they are falsifying ages for eligibility at Junior Worlds. And though Wikipedia is often somehow scrubbed to protect athletes, the Internet Archive is our friend and an invaluable tool for a brief history lesson into how the ISU dealt with the multiple birth dates of Sui and Han and the Zhangs. According to official records, Sui Wenjing was born July 18, 1995, or May 7, 1997. Her partner, Han Kong, was born August 6, 1992, or March 1989. You see, in February 2011, Han's and Sui's ages became the subject of controversy. Although Han's ISU bio lists him as being born August 6, 1992, a Chinese website and database suggested that he was actually born in March 1989. This would mean that during the 2010-2011 season, he was too old for junior events. His partner's age also came under scrutiny. Sui's ISU bio states that she was born on July 18, 1995, but that same Chinese website and database suggested she was actually born on May 7, 1997, making her 12 and thus too young to compete in the junior events during the 2009-2010 season, including the 2010 World Junior Championships, as well as the Senior Grand Prix events they participated in during the 2010-2011 season. So despite the controversy, in February 2011, the ISU didn't take any action. And even though Han was already believed to be too old to participate at Junior Worlds, they were even allowed to compete at Junior Worlds the following season. You see, Sui and Han were allowed to compete at Junior Worlds in 2010, 2011, and 2012. They were potentially ineligible to compete at any of them. They won gold at all three events. No disciplinary action was ever taken by the ISU. That same year, that same month, February 14th, 2011, the Zhang's ages also became the subject of controversy. although his ISU bio lists Zhang Hao as being born on July 6, 1984, a Chinese Skating Association website suggested he was born on February 6, 1982. This would mean that he was too old to compete at junior events during the 2002-2003 season, such as the World Junior Championships, where the Zhangs won gold. His partner's age also came under scrutiny. Her ISU bio states that she was born on October 4th, 1985, but the Chinese website suggested that she was born on that day in 1987, meaning that she was 14 and too young to compete at senior events during the 2001-2002 season, such as the Four Continents Championships, where they won bronze, as well as the Olympics and World Championships. The dates somehow disappeared from the website February 15th, just a day after the age falsification came to light. Funny how that happens. On February 17th, the ISU said that there were no discrepancies for the Zhangs in terms of the birth dates listed on their passports, the ISU registration forms, or the Chinese Olympic Committee's website. All three documents which rely on federations to supply and verify the information. This is the same excuse that was used in 2008 in gymnastics. And while we cannot cut athletes open like a tree to count their rings, it is curious how the government databases are consistently out of alignment for these athletes, and the international sporting federations don't seem to hold certain powerful federations accountable. International competitors will also point out that it isn't just the Russians who are doping. It is telling that the other athlete who tested positive for trimetazidine was a Chinese swimmer. Megan Duhamel will tell you about going to doping control with Chinese skaters who listed taking at least a full page or more of supplements on their doping control forms. One Chinese skater even told her that her official birth year was incorrect. Another Chinese skater left a pill bottle behind at the dinner table at a Grand Prix event. Duhamel's then partner took the pill bottle to a chemist in Montreal. The pills were for weight loss. In 2019, Alyona Kosternaya allegedly left a wrapper behind in a locker room at a Senior B event. Skaters also attempted to find the address on that. It so happened that the address that reportedly was on the wrapper was fake. There is another connection between Russia and China that is too good to pass up. You see, Dr. Shvetsky isn't just the mastermind behind Valieva's endurance cocktail of trimetazidine, L-carnitine, and hypoxin, or Anna Sherbakova's powdered food. He isn't just the doctor who injected Yekaterina Bobrova with meldonium when it was banned, or the Russian rowers with prohibited intravenous injections, which resulted in Shvetsky and the rowers being banned. Yet amazingly, Shvetsky didn't stay banned for ruining the Olympic careers of the rowers, or for having Bobrova test positive for meldonium. His career has continued to flourish. You see, just as Grigory Rodchenkov was plucked from prison to help with Russia's preparation for Operation Rezultat in Sochi, Shvetsky was also brought back after being banned with his work for the rowers. Now, if you have read the work of Gabrielle Pollack on Twitter, you will know that she has done immense investigation into Dr. Shvetsky. She discovered that when his suspension was lifted, he joined the national figure skating team. You see, in 2009, Alexander Gorshkov founded the Center for Strategic Research in Olympic Sports. His hiring announcement reads, "Having not gained a single kilo of excess weight after leaving the ice, he continues to amaze, not only with his smartness, but also with his impeccable taste." That taste is indeed magnificent, as it is believed that Gorshkov potentially pushed for the hiring of Dr. Shvetsky and lobbied with Vitaly Mutko for Shvetsky's ban to be lifted after the Russian Figure Skating Federation achieved dismal results at the 2010 Olympic Games and was experiencing a cash crunch and money laundering scandals. The ban doctor was brought back into the fold for the preparation of Sochi. Though separate from the cocktails Rodchenkov was administering for athletes in more traditional sports, the mission of Shvetsky remained the same. It is curious that even Evgeny Plushenko was able to be brought back from the figure skating dead once more to compete in Sochi during the team event, with scores and performances that appeared to defy physics and the judging system criteria. And yet, Plushenko was unable to replicate it in the individual event. Shvetsky also worked at the Atomic Medical Center during this time, which is where he developed methods of using xenon gas in sport. The Russian Sports Ministry hired the Atomic Medical Center for its Olympic preparation, because that's normal. See, he transitioned from the medical center to the Russian Figure Skating Federation and immediately began working closely with coaches Nina Mosier and Eteri Tutberidze. And wouldn't you know, both coaches, who had long been regarded as mere junior coaches, suddenly began achieving unprecedented success at the senior level, just as they began working with Dr. Shvetsky. It isn't just the coaches who succeeded quickly. In the 2012-2013 season, Ksenia Stolbova and Fedor Klimov were sixth at Europeans and failed to compete at the World Figure Skating Championships. In April of 2013, they moved to Moscow to work with Nina Mosier, and thus, Dr. Philip Shvetsky himself. By the next season, Stolbova and Klimov were second at Europeans, Worlds, and the Olympics, even ahead of Alyona Savchenko. They came out of nowhere like magic. 4 years later, Stolbova and Klimov were second at Russian nationals and Europeans and were expected to participate in another Olympics, until it was announced by the Russian Figure Skating Federation that they weren't invited to participate at the 2018 Olympic Games by the IOC. You see, athletes weren't invited to participate if they had been involved in doping situations, of which Stolbova had long been accused of being named in the McLaren report from Sochi. The other figure skater not invited to participate was Ivan Bukin. His partner, Alexandra Stepanova, has long discussed visiting the infamous German doctor for infusions for her back every season. She is barely able to walk, but is suddenly miraculously better after a single injection. That doctor uses the banned drug Octavagin and is known as a shadowy figure in sports. He is also the same doctor used by every Russian rhythmic gymnast, artistic gymnast, and numerous figure skaters. And after the dismal results by Russian ice dancers this season, it is believed that Stepanova and Bukin may return to competition next season, even after Stepanova recently gave birth. And if anything can hurt your back, it's surely being pregnant. Whether or not Russian figure skaters are able to fly to Munich remains to be seen. Now, someone who worked closely with Dr. Shvetsky is Russian figure skating Olympic champion Tatiana Volosozhar. Her husband, Maxim Trankov, actually works on the staff of Eteri Tutberidze, who's suddenly a pair coach. Gabby Pollock found another scoop when she discovered that after her career, Tatiana Volosozhar went to work with Dr. Shvetsky to promote the merits of Xenon Gas in sports. Dr. Shvetsky is also the runner and creator of a nonprofit known as the Smolnikov Foundation. He's so freaking charitable, which ran a sports publishing outfit, Sport Inside, that hired Tatiana Volosozhar as a sports blogger. In this role, Tatiana and Shvetsky traveled to China to promote the writing of Xi'an pioneer Smolnikov at a meeting with Chinese medical students, attended by Chinese Figure Skating Federation President Chen Lu. Another interesting tidbit is that Chen Lu's husband is Denis Petrov, a Russian. That comes in handy just in case they need a translator. Xenon is now banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency. Though it was not banned earlier at the time of this meeting, it's not exactly the same thing as taking an echinacea. You see, WADA didn't know what it didn't know. It didn't know that it needed to ban xenon. And just so happens, there are currently no tests available to detect it. When we discuss Russian athlete neutrality, it's important to remember just how high up Russian sports are within the government. On one website, you could read the composition of the council under the president of the Russian Federation for the Development of Physical Culture and Sports. President Vladimir Putin is chairman of the council. That would be the same thing as President Biden being that concerned with the performance of United States athletes at the Olympic Games that he created an entire council to achieve results. It's not just Putin who is on the council. Chernyshenko, the deputy chairman of the government of the Russian Federation, is deputy chairman of the council. I.E. Levitin, assistant to the president of the Russian Federation, is another deputy chairman of the council. There's also many other federation leaders who are on here and the head of certain regions of the country. You see, you'll also see other of our favorite characters, Irina Viner Uzmanova, president of the All-Russian Federation of Rhythmic Gymnastics, and former wife of Alisher Usmanov, who led Gazprom, which was a sponsor of Team Tutberidze. Alexander Gorshkov, president of the Russian Figure Skating Federation, is also a member of this council. The chairman of the State Duma Committee on Physical Culture, Sports, Tourism, and Youth Affairs is also a member of this council. One of the Russian members of the IOC is also a member of this council, as well as the president of the Russian Paralympic Committee. The head of the FMBA, the Russian Federal Biomedical Agency, which has quite interesting labs in Novogorsk, is also a member. And you see there are other people from Russian tennis. Remember Maria Sharapova, tennis player, also tested positive for meldonium. And others, federations of volleyball, and the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. Now really, can you imagine a United States that the Pentagon would be involved in the Olympic preparation? It's curious. Irina Viner just so happened to be in the news again. According to Inside the Games, Russian Rhythmic Gymnastics Federation President Irina Viner has denied that the gala show she directed for the Defender of the Fatherland Day had a militaristic component involving athletes. The holiday celebrates people who are serving or were serving the Russian armed forces and coincided with the first anniversary on February 24th of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Wiener claimed that the display was just a tribute to those who have lost their lives fighting for Russia and had nothing to do with the events in Ukraine. Video footage had emerged on social media of Wiener directing members of the parade at the Irina Viner Uzmanova Gymnastics Palace in the Russian capital of Moscow. The video showed men and women dressed in military uniform marching to the song, "Stalin Gave the Order." The show also saw performances from the Russian rhythmic gymnastics team and the Kavarto group. The display was also attended by Olympic silver medalist Dina Averna, five-time world champion Irina Averna, and European champion Lala Kramarenko. Stalingrad was recaptured with the name of Stalin, so this name still remained in our memory, Wiener told Russia's official state news agency, TASS. And what kind of militarism could be seen in today's concert? Last year, a concert was held on the same day, and there was no special military operation yet. We just celebrated the day defenders of the fatherland, as we do now. Wiener accused Inside the Games of being fakes for reporting on this event. They even turned to the International Federation for comments on the fact that Wiener was in command of the parade to the song "Artillerymen, Stalin Gave the Order," she told Pass. Yes, he gave the order. For our mothers, for our motherland. You saw how the children sing it, and I am very pleased. Uzbek-born Viner is considered one of the most successful rhythmic gymnastic coaches of all time, having trained the likes of Russian Olympic champions Yevgenia Koneeva, Alina Kabayeva, and Yulia Barshakova. She is alleged to have introduced Russian President Vladimir Putin to Alina Kabayeva, leading to her becoming his mistress, and they reportedly have had children together. Viner was married to Uzbek-born Russian oligarch Alisher Usmanov for 30 years before their divorce in May last year, which is largely speculated to be a divorce meant to hide assets. Usmanov agreed to step aside as president of the International Fencing Federation following the European Union's decision to impose economic sanctions on him over Russia's military assault on Ukraine. This 69-year-old businessman has also been sanctioned by the U.S. and the United Kingdom. He was also a member of President Vladimir Putin's Council for Sport, which we discussed earlier. The International Olympic Committee has insisted that the Olympic Games cannot prevent wars, but can inspire us to solve problems by building bridges, in a statement coming just 2 days before the painful one-year anniversary of the start of Russia's military assault on Ukraine. Friday, February 24th will mark 1 year since Russia launched its widely condemned full-scale invasion of Ukraine with the assistance of its military ally, Belarus. The IOC responded last year by calling on all sports organizations to ban Russian and Belarusian athletes and officials from competitions and to stop the two nations from hosting events. Yet last month, the IOC announced that it would explore a pathway for the return of athletes from Russia and Belarus to international sport under strict conditions of neutrality. The move has sparked anger from Ukrainian officials, with the National Olympic Committee of Ukraine threatening to boycott next year's Olympics in Paris over the presence of Russians and Belarusians. A coalition of 35 countries signed a statement which claimed that there was no practical reason for the IOC to lift the ban on the Russian and Belarusian athletes while Ukraine remains under attack, and raised strong concerns over the feasibility of them participating under a neutral banner. Now, it's interesting because the Washington Post had reported that the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee was originally warm to the idea of allowing Russian athletes back as neutrals, which was expected to be the result of television ratings and sponsorships. But the United States State Department actually signed the statement for Russia to continue to be barred from international sport this week. The IOC has released a statement calling on the Olympic movement to join calls for peace and stating that it stands ready to make its modest contribution to any peace-building efforts. With no end in sight to fighting after 1 year of bloodshed, the IOC reiterates its condemnation of the war in Ukraine, which is a blatant violation of the Olympic truce that was in effect at the time and the Olympic Charter. For this reason, the IOC sanctioned Russia and Belarusian states and governments, who are solely responsible for this war, in an unprecedented way. No international sports events organized in Russia and Belarus, no flag, anthems, or other national symbols whatsoever may be displayed, and no government or state officials accredited for any international sports events. These sanctions were put in place in February 2022 and were then reinforced, further strengthened, and confirmed by the recent Olympic Summit on December 9th, 2022. They remain firmly in place. The IOC said it remained committed to its mission to unite the entire world in peaceful competition, highlighting how athletes from North and South Korea and Israel and Palestine competed on the same field despite political tensions. During the Olympic Games, athletes from 206 different national Olympic committees lived together in peace in the Olympic Village, the IOC said. Peace-building efforts need dialogue. A competition with athletes who respect the Olympic Charter can serve as a catalyst for dialogue, which is always a first step to achieving peace. The Olympic Games cannot prevent wars and conflict, nor can they address all the political and social challenges in our world. This is the realm of politics, but the Olympic Games can set an example for a world where everyone respects the same rules in one another. They can inspire us to solve problems by building bridges, leading to better understanding among people. they can open the door to dialogue and peace building in ways that exclusion and division do not. The overwhelming majority of the Olympic movement, including the athletes, national Olympic committees, and international federations, support the unwavering solidarity with Ukraine, the sanctions imposed on Russia and Belarus, and the peace-building unifying mission of the Olympic movement. United in this Olympic spirit, on the painful one-year mark, the entire Olympic movement reiterates the call we made 1 year ago to all political leaders of the world: give peace a chance. Now, the ISU has actually followed the IOC's dictum of this, though they said they will not discuss the return of Russia athletes as neutrals until mid-March. Now, it's interesting because the gymnasts who are trying to qualify for the Olympic Games from Russia may be allowed to compete at the Asian Games this June. It is yet to be seen whether or not they'll actually be able to qualify to the Olympics via the Asian Games, and that is something that remains extremely controversial. Remember that all athletes who may be able to participate as neutrals would have to be politically neutral and not for the war. Yet you see Kramarenko and the Averina twins were just a part of Irina Viner's military concert, which certainly raises even more questions about whether those athletes could truly be considered neutral. Dina Averina also appeared with Vladimir Putin at the original rally at the start of the invasion in Ukraine, where she wore the Z, alongside Tarasova and Morozov, and Sinitsina and Katsalapov. In other news, Alexandra Trusova withdrew from the Russian Cup final. No explanation has been given. In recent weeks, we have seen photos of Sasha posing for advertisements for Plushenka's latest ice show, where she swims underwater as a mermaid. It has been several months since she has competed as a member of the Russian national team. Her motivation for training remains unclear. There are those who speculate that Sasha is more motivated by fame at the moment. Others think she lacks motivation after suffering a trauma at the Olympics and simply has nothing to strive for. If Russia is allowed back in international competition, would it be enough for Sasha to return? With all the talks of Russian athletes potentially earning neutral status, it is important to remember that Russia would only have one spot available to them in each discipline at the next World Championships they were allowed to participate in. Sasha has spent years feeling disregarded by the Russian Federation and its judges. It is unlikely to believe that even a Sasha in top form would be given that spot, or believe that she would be given that spot, regardless of the many medical talents of Dr. Philip Shvetsky.